What is up, everybody? Welcome to TDR Show. I'm Kevin Coleman, and that man is Jay Stein. I know we don't see him as much. He's a busy man. He's out here partying in the Bahamas. He had a lot of fun during spring break, so we missed him last week, but he's back. I don't know for how long. Anytime he comes, it's like a solar eclipse. We're just excited that he's here for that moment, and then he's back here. So, and we got a fun one, and we got a fun couple episodes coming up, but this one, we're talking who has next. And this is going to be fun because we're going to get yelled at, and it's 100%. I am really tired of the YouTube content out there that I keep seeing. It's the same stuff. Rookies, where are my rankings? Where are mock drafts? I mean, we're part of that problem too. So we said, you know what? Let's do something a little different. So what we're going to be looking at here is we're looking at every position in Dynasty and who could be number one overall outside of a current either top 5 or top 10 at their position. So we're going to get a little hot takey, a little bit of fun here, kind of talking about some player values. And so stick around with us and we'll hit it after the intro. All right, we got to do parameters first. So before we get into players, Jay gets nervous about this type of stuff. So we got to make sure we talk about all of this in here. So how are we picking our guys, right? So for the quarterback position, we're looking at guys outside the top 5. So current top 5 right now, according to Dynasty Rank, it's kind of basically we looked at all kinds of Dynasty rankings. We put them together and said, all right, these are kind of consensus top 5. Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes. So outside of that, what are we looking in terms of a quarterback? Who could be quarterback 1? Running back, outside top 10. So we want to go a little deeper for the running back and wide receiver. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, running back is hard. Okay. So when you get outside the top 10, it is a crapshoot. And we did include rookies in this. So there are rookies included before the draft here. So currently outside the top 10. So here's the top 10 running backs. Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Genty, Saquon Barkley, Achane, Breece Hall, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Amarian Hampton, Kyron Williams. So anybody outside of that was fair game on the board there. Wide receivers, a little easier because there's some very obviously talented wide receivers out there. So outside of this group, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, CeeDee Lamb, Brian Thomas Jr., Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, Nico Collins, Drake London. And then outside the top 5 for tight ends, we have Brock, Trey McBride, Sam Laporta, Hawkinson, and Kittle. Anything you want to clarify before we dive into our guys, Jay? That you
just keep this in mind. I mean, obviously, everybody would love to pick Malik Neighbors here or Brian Thomas Jr. or something like that, but that is excluded from our options to pick. So when we're going through that, just keep that in mind. These are all the exclusions here, and we're going down a little bit further to try and pick these guys.
I wanted to be a little bit different, and just to everybody out there listening or watching, if you're on YouTube, everybody can say, oh, well, Malik Neighbors is going to be the wide receiver 1, right? Some were saying that last year, like first couple games, it's like that. We get that. That can happen. But it's like, all right, let's go a little deeper here. And this is a dynasty show, and this is kind of talking about like what could happen, who's the future 1 at that position. And let's just have some fun with it, right? Let's get a little bit deeper in terms of the players, like who can maybe, when we've seen this, we've seen guys pop out of nowhere. Like, for example, Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving became running back 3 at one point last year at a certain time in dynasty rankings. So like we have seen guys just vault up that were outside the top 10. Now it's very much not a sure-proof method from an analytics perspective, probably not either. But it's fun. That's the whole point of this. Make fantasy fun again. Like that's okay to do. I think it is fun to kind of talk about some of these things. So we're gonna go to quarterbacks. We have a couple interesting ones. I would talk a little bit too much. I'm gonna let Jay pick his quarterback first. We're gonna go into it, and then we'll go from there. So, Jay, based on who you think could be QB1 overall, who do you got?
I got Drake May.
Okay.
So, what we're doing here is we're trying to shoot for upside. We're looking at guys that aren't at the very top of the position, but then have that like tremendous upside that could get to that QB1. So it's all about the upside here, less so about the downside on these things. And Drake May, he had, he started most of last season and he had a pretty good first year, especially for not having the weapons there and now having a entirely new coaching staff here with a new system. So you got a little bit of transition here, but he looked really, really good. And, very high pick in the draft. The Patriots are all behind Drake May. There aren't the question marks here, right? You have Bryce Young come into the league, not play very well. With Drake May, you have Caleb Williams come in the league, kind of a little bit of question marks there, although there's some coaching changes there. Drake May, he kind of proved what he needed to prove that first year. So very, very excited about what he could do and how high he can rise. In terms of his value of where he kind of is, if you go to Keep Trade Cut, that's QB8. If you go to Fantasy Calc, that's QB10. Value wise, that's a 1.02 plus a fourth rounder or a late third rounder is basically about where he's going out there in the market. And then, from a fantasy points and an expectation point. So last year, he scored about 15 points per game, which was good for QB 26. And his expected points per game were a little bit lower than that, about 14, QB 34. But if you take away 3 games where he didn't play very much, so you love the arguments of where you just sort of cherry pick games, but this is the majority of the season. This is the majority of the season that we're taking away here. Yeah. But there's a lot of games in here. But I'm taking away 3 games where he either didn't start or he didn't play very much, but it still kind of counted towards that. His points per game were about 18.1. And his expected points per game were 17.4. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the guy that can get breakthrough up to like 22 points per game, 23 points per game on a given year and sort of get to that, QB1 points per game perspective, which then leads to a value gain as well. And so I think with that 18 points per game in the first season, excluding those certain games, that's really, really good. And then you have to keep in mind, he's doing it with very little pass catching talent around him. This is not a very good wide receiver room. And what we have is we've got a new head coach in Mike Vrabel. You got a new offensive coordinator in Josh McDaniels. We'll see how that plays out, but there have been seasons where Josh McDaniel offenses and quarterbacks do fairly well. So you don't want to rule any of that. They addressed some things in free agency. They added a couple of linemen and Garrett Bradbury and Morgan Moses. They added Stephon Diggs this free agencies. We'll see if he's able to bounce back and come back, but generally thought of as a pretty good wide receiver, maybe on the tail end of his career, but really, really good. Probably the best patch catcher that the Patriots have. But there's still a great need there at pass catcher. Hopefully they address that through the draft. But this is a guy that he averaged 200 pass yards per game, and he averaged 30 rush yards per game, sprinkling some TDs. That rushing piece of it is very, very important because I do think he has that upside that can get him to get to the fantasy points per game one. So if he gets into that 20, 22 points per game range, then he's up there competing with them. And then you add in the youth here behind him. He then would have, in my eyes, he has that upside of one. We were just talking about last year, CJ Stroud at points during the offseason was as QB1, and he didn't even have the rushing upside. Drake May has the rushing upside. The issue is the supporting cast. And I think he has the rushing upside, the passing upside. If we could just, maybe if they add a good wide receiver in the NFL draft, but there's a lot of young talent there. Then you add in Stephon Diggs, and you got Hunter Henry, and you got some other guys. But, that's the hope. That's how you get him up to the QB1. And so I think that, he's got a good shot as any. I do like your guy. Who do you choose here?
Well, before I get in mine, so I took JJ McCarthy. There's a couple caveats here. So I think for you with Drake May, number one thing that I was going to touch on, but you hit it right at the end. The rushing upside's there, over 400 yards. He has that, right? So you can notice from both of our guys, we looked for guys that could run. Like we were looking for that little extra something. Give me that little bit of rushing production in there, because I think McCarthy can. We'll get into that, but May definitely can. He's going to need to though. So like my biggest thing with Drake May, and the reason why I didn't pick him here is because of his supporting cast, because I could see him turning into, and this is not a knock at all, so please don't come after me in the comments, a Justin Herbert type asset, right? Because Justin Herbert has struggled with this, like maybe the scheme. And I know he had Keenan Allen, but he had Keenan Allen's fine, but Keenan Allen's not like, let's say, a Justin Jefferson, right? Like what you see with McCarthy having. Like, what is Drake May's guy? Because the Diggs thing makes me laugh, because half last year, do you remember how many people were crapping on Diggs last year when he went to Houston? Oh, he's not going to be good. All of a sudden, he goes to the Patriots now, and all the Patriots fans are like, oh, this is a great signing. Look at this sign. And I'm like, wait a minute. You can't have it both ways. Like, what is this? This same guy here. It's just homerism to a T there. I just don't love the weapons, right? So now, doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to go draft the Ted McMillan at 4 or another wide receiver there. Or I saw Javon Baker hype videos today. I love offseason, baby. Like, we're seeing stuff like that. But that's where I think it limits him a little bit, right? But if he does go get a weapon, then yeah, you're talking about probably, and I like the pick, right? I was between 3 guys. So it was between Drake, Caleb Williams, and JJ McCarthy. Now, I was going to go Caleb, but I've talked about Caleb a lot. I've written about him a lot. And I kind of wanted to be a little different. And I wanted to, Jay already took the QB 8 out there, and then Caleb's sitting there at like QB 9. So let me get a little deeper here. So JJ McCarthy is kind of sitting there at QB 14-ish to 16 range, depending on rankings that you're looking at. Now, why did I pick him? Well, one, when you're looking at what Sam Darnold did last year for Minnesota, he was QB 8 already. He averaged 19.5 fantasy points per game at QB 8 with Sam Darnold. And I'm sorry, but JJ is a much better prospect and player than Sam Darnold is. Like, just from an athleticism perspective, from just a quarterback perspective, as just a prospect. And I liked Sam coming out of USC. But when you look at JJ, much more experienced player coming off that national championship. Yes, he had the injury. But first of all, if Darnold can do that in that offense, JJ to me can do that as well. I'm probably more, right? Especially from a rushing standpoint. Darnold is okay on the ground. Like, there is some there, but not to JJ's extent from just an athleticism perspective. So I think, when you look at McCarthy, he's got the tools, arm strength, mobility, playmaking ability there. And I know we've only seen him in one preseason. I get it. Like, we've only seen him in one preseason game, but he's in the best possible environment imaginable for a young quarterback, right? Elite weapons, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. What would you say? How would you rank those guys? Top 3 in the league, those 2 quarterbacks, or excuse me, wide receivers?
Just like the Minnesota wide receiver room in general.
Yeah. Just how would you rank? Top 3, right? In NFL?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really, I mean, Justin Jefferson in any room, it makes it good. But then Jordan Addison is pretty good as well. And, sneakily, I like Jalen Naylor, but they added Rondale Moore as well, as another guy that I like as well. So I love the pass catching group for the Vikings. It's awesome. That's a great group.
Think you could argue, and I know T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are out there, so I get it out there. Comments, I get that's coming. You could argue that they're 1B to that. I think that there are at least 2 or 3 in that range. Like, I in terms of what they could do and put out there. So you're putting that around him. Let's talk about Hawkinson. Hawkinson is okay. Like, I think that, from a dynasty perspective, I'm selling, but I still think he could be a very serviceable piece in that offense too. So he's got that. He's got O'Connell, right? Kevin O'Connell's offense around him can work that out there. And I just look at it and I say, he wasn't asked to carry the offense in Michigan too much, but that doesn't mean that he can't carry it in Minnesota with what his tools and weapons are in that offense. And the upside is there. Like, yeah, there's risk. There's always going to be risk involved here, but the upside, perfect situation, athleticism, value as a runner. And when you're looking at this, so CFB numbers, for those of you listening or watching, go check out he has a new tool. He builds tools for fun. This guy is like one of my favorite guys ever. And he built like a quarterback comparison tool. So I've been playing around with it a little bit. So I did drop this in our Substack when I was doing Dynasty Rankings update, but I have it in this and I'll try to explain it the best I can. So basically what it looked at, it was looking at success rate, EPA, sack rate, rush EPA, pass EPA, all the EPA stuff, kind of explosive rate, all those things, right? And he's trying to compare, like, okay, how good is this quarterback comparable to other guys? So I put him up against CJ Stroud in 2022, the CJ Stroud year that CJ Stroud was phenomenal, right? Probably should have won a national championship, but they choked. And so you're looking at 2022 CJ Stroud, 23 JJ McCarthy. McCarthy actually grades out better at almost every single category. Almost. There's like a little bit that Stroud kind of does there, like sack rate. He's a little bit better. But you know where he really grades out at? Rush EPA. And he really grades out from an athleticism perspective there. And like if Stroud was getting he was getting drafted top 3 in some drafts last year, heading into the season last year in off season. It wouldn't shock me to see JJ elevate himself into a point where he's in the top 5 conversation. Now QB1 might be lofty, but that's what we're here for. We're just talking about future. Could be. But I could see JJ loft himself in there.
Yeah, I love that. I've been a JJ guy. I was pounding the table on JJ early in that season and then through draft season. I think he's in just an incredible situation where Drake May, this situation is not great, but he had a good first year and wasn't injured and performed well. McCarthy, you have the injury risk. You have he didn't play, but he is a really, really good prospect coming out. And I'm really, really excited about his potential. The system is perfect. The weapons are perfect. This is an awesome, awesome player. It only takes the 1.05 in this year's draft to get JJ McCarthy, and I want him. I do that every single time because I think he definitely has the potential to be in that top 5 of QBs. And so I think that this is a really good high upside play for a guy that what did you say, QB 14 range or something, like QB 12 range? That's awesome, and I'd love to get that. Now there is risk here. There's definitely risk here. We didn't see him play last year. You're coming off the injury, but this is a risk that I'd want to try and take a bet on.
That's not true. He balled out in that one preseason game. Remember, he had that one pass. Like we saw him play. Just not necessarily more than that. The other guys, when I was going through the list, it was hard. Like Caleb for sure. I think it really comes down to these 3, right? Is there anybody else out there? No Bo Nix love. Jordan Love, probably not. Kyler off the chain a little bit. Cam Ward, no. Justin Herbert. Patrick's sitting there, but it's just so hard with Patrick because from a fantasy perspective, he's been so bad. Anybody else besides Caleb?
I think like Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray are guys that, have spent time at QB1, but that was because of sort of like the unknown. They did really well from a fantasy points perspective in terms of scoring. They had the rushing ability, but they were young and they were unknown. The problem is it just didn't hold. It didn't stick. They weren't able to consistently put up the 20 plus points per game, or had injuries or had stuff that got in the way that got away. And once you kind of get that nomer to your name of like, it's hard to get back into that QB1 range once you're kind of out of that and everybody sort of knows who you are type of thing. Mm-hmm. I do think they have, from a points per game perspective, like a Herbert or a Kyler Murray, I think they have the potential to get into the high end 20 plus points per game season. But the problem is are people going to value them now as a QB1 given where they are in their careers? I'm not sure. Where a Drake May and a JJ McCarthy, they have all that unknown upside to them as well. So that kind of allows you to kind of push it much further than where they are. And then they have to consistently put up the points per game. But, am I going to bet that Kyler Murray makes his way up to QB1 again? Probably not. No. Even if he balls out, probably not. He's probably not going to pass some of these guys.
No, that's why you go with the youth, right? That's why you got to hang with the youth. There is some biasy there. All right, let's jump to the hardest position, running backs. So let's talk about, and then of course we took the easy way out. That's just what we do here because we were looking at that top 10, and we couldn't pick Ashton Genty, we couldn't pick Omar and Hampton because they're in that top 10 already. And then we're kind of looking at, I know I was looking at it myself with Jay, Kenneth Walker's out there, who I think is sneaky. I like that. We'll talk about him later, but I like that. Judkins is also out there, but we just took 2 rookies, right? I took Travion Henderson, Ohio State running back. He took Caleb Johnson. And Jay, it's interesting. I'm excited to hear this because Caleb is not someone that I know I'm very high on, depending on spot. He's one of those guys to me where if he lands in a favorable spot, I'll probably be a little higher on him than I was before. But what do you see with him? Could be running back 1. Give me your take.
Yeah, I like Caleb Johnson, and I think out of all the rookies that I'm seeing this season, I think he's the one that's kind of most misunderstood. And it's not that like he's going to be like, for instance, Travion Henderson. It's not like he's going to light anything up or anything like that, but I think he's going to be that consistent guy, and he could be a 3-down back or even a first and early down back and get a lot of work and a lot of carries. So, last year, 2024, he had 240 attempts for 1,500 yards. He averaged 128 rush yards per game. He averaged 6.4 yards per attempt. He was 10th in attempts, 6th in yards on the season, 15th in yards per attempt, 5th in yards in rush TDs, 25th in PFF rush grade, 12th in yards after contact per attempt. And if you go to a minimum of 190 attempts, he was 2nd in that. 12th in missed tackles forced, 10th in breakaways percentage. And if you go back to 190 attempts, he was 1st in breakaway percentage. There is a lot a lot to like about what Caleb Johnson did in year 3. Throughout his career, he had a really good year 1. It wasn't good from a like crazy good from an accounting perspective, but from the age or experience adjusted metrics that I look at, it was a pretty good year 1. Year 2 was not as good, and then year 3 he just goes off, and it like all the advanced stats, he's pretty high in a lot of this stuff. So like yards per team play, he was 4th, just behind Genty, Scadaboo, and slightly behind Hampton. All these stats he's doing really, really good in. And the issue is that the film guys don't really like him. But for the data guys, this is a really good profile. It looks really good. He's a year 3 early declare. He'll be 21 on draft day. Right now they got him going day 2 in like the mock draft databases, but I guess there's some potential of maybe him slipping into early day 3. He's 225 pounds, 30.5 BMI, and again, I'll reiterate, 128 yards per game in Big Ten football last year. Pretty good. I personally, in terms of, I like to rank tier up these positions. I have him in my tier 2. Behind, I have Ashton Genty in tier 1, Omarion Hampton, and Caleb Johnson in tier 2. So I think Caleb Johnson and Omari Hampton are kind of on the same playing field when it comes to how to tier up these running backs because of what he was able to do in college. I think this guy is probably needs that zone scheme, that zone rushing scheme. I think he's really skilled at that, and he can do really well if he gets in sort of that situation. I looked back, he describes his running style in his own words: one cut, get vertical. He doesn't like juking around or messing around. One cut, get vertical. If I have to, then I will start juking, but that's not his preference. He likes running people over. He likes stiff running, and I think he can outrun a lot of people. Maybe that doesn't show on the 40 time, but when you're watching him play, he has a lot of breakaways, and that shows up in the breakaway percentage first in all of college football. If you go with a minimum of 190 attempts. So I think there's tremendous upside here. I think he's getting overlooked from a value perspective. You can get him for 2.03. That's not necessarily exactly where he's getting drafted. I see him getting drafted a little bit higher than that, like end of the first, early second. But if you can give an early second and get Caleb Johnson out of it, I love that deal. I love where he is. And if you're looking at just like where he's ranking on KTC, he's running back 21. On Fantasy Calc, he's running back 19. So that's really, really far down there. I went far down to grab him. He's been falling a little bit, but I really do like this profile. And if he gets in one of those situations where there's a ton of opportunity and he can be that guy, and it's a sort of like that zone running scheme, I think this is a guy that can really put up a lot of numbers. And again, you got the youth, you got the early declare, all that feeds into it. Maybe he gets up into that top 5 running backs.
Yeah. No. So here's what. So a couple things. Caleb Johnson. Here's a comp for him. You let me know. I don't think we've shared our comp for you as we're doing the rookie guide. So we haven't done that yet. We haven't shared over. So our comp right now in the rookie guide for Caleb Johnson is James Conner. That's our comp. And it's fine, right? Like
I'd be fine with that.
He could be that. I think the question I have for you, or maybe this is a film-based thing. So the one knock that we kind of have on him is he struggles really heavily in pass protection. So the question I would have with Caleb is, will he be on the field enough early in his career to get to that running back 1 type mantra, right? He would really have to be efficient on first and second down, and almost kind of like a Derrick Henry light-ish, not like a player comp, just like, hey, got to be on the field, and we have to keep him out there on third down because he's that special, right? He might limit us from a pass blocking perspective, and he might limit us from that perspective, but we got to keep him out there because he has that straight line speed. Like you mentioned it, he has that. Like you see that burst, that zone scheme and straight line speed. When he gets downhill, oh boy, you better get off the tracks because he's coming and he's going to just destroy you. Like that's what he does well. So I think, yes, 100%. He's really capable of handling a very heavy workload early, right? That early down workload. that's the positive. That's where I could see where you're talking about, like, hey, if he does that, then yeah, he's gonna scream like, hey, value, value, value. I just worry that, yeah, like the receiving skill set is an issue. That's number one. Like pass blocking and receiving, will he get down there on third down? And I think that's what'll hold him back the most.
Yeah, and it's all about getting on the field and getting as much opportunity as you can. And if you cannot pass block in the NFL, it's going to be a problem. Your coach is going to have a problem with that, and so you limit your amount of ability to be on the field. But there's I think there's ways to get around this. And the comment here I'll make is he was Iowa's offense last year to the same extent that Ashton Jeanty was Boise State's offense. Caleb Johnson was the entire Iowa offense. And, when you have a situation like that and you can get yourself in a situation like that in the NFL, it does make a lot of sense. And that could be, something that signifies. But if you can't stay on the field because you can't pass block, that is a problem. That would be a red flag and an issue. I just hope I'm, shooting for the upside. I hope that's not the case in this situation.
All right, let's go to mine. TreVeyon Henderson. So, and you should notice something about the running backs. We just picked young because that's where the value's at. Like the younger the back, the more value they can accumulate, right? The Bucky Irving, the Tyrone Tracy, these type of guys, that's just the reality. Or even think about it too, and I'm part of this dumb crew. Like think about DeAndre Swift. He held his value for a very long time because he never got injured. He had potential. He has potential. I know he's got potential. That's kind of how it works with these running backs and the value that he had there. And we couldn't pick Hampton or freaking Jeanty because they're already in the top 10. So that's where we lean. So Henderson, let's talk about it. We've talked about him a lot. The reason why I would say that, I'm looking at it from a perspective of like, could be that guy that vaults up before even playing a down. You know why? Because, scouts and people out there are really talking about him having a shot going in the first round. And I know Hampton's been all the love and Jeanty's been all the love there, but there are some back-end first-round teams that might move up for a guy like TreVeyon Henderson. And if that happens, if he was to get first-round capital, he immediately shoots up in the top 10, right? Just rankings-wise, he's going there. Now, that's without saying what he can do on the field, right? Elite speed. He could take a 70-yard pass, swing pass, see the college football playoff. Gone, right? A screen, going to score a touchdown there. Very soft hands, is the opposite of Caleb in terms of receiving profile. And he is exceptional pass blocker. He might be the best pass blocker we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. Not this year, 3 or 4 years. Like that is really his skill. That's something that Ohio State utilized, and he can be out there. So he has the high level receiving, can be the home run threat. Now, will he get the volume? That's the biggest question mark. I think that's the one that you're like, all right, will he get enough volume there? But remember, that was a question mark about Jahmyr Gibbs too. And Jahmyr Gibbs is dynasty running back 2 right now. And 1 in some spots, right? Like I have him at 1 because I'm crazy. Like that's just Gibbs. Like that's where he is. Now, I'm not saying he is Gibbs because they're different profiles. Like Henderson is a carries weight a little differently. I would say he's a little bit bigger in terms of his run style. I think that he can be more of that 3-down guy, but he does have the durability stuff. So that's also the question mark. And that's the thing too. And I know Jay's going to yell at me about it. So that's why I had to bring it up beforehand. It's like I'm on trial. So I'm like, I'm just going to just it's like 8 Mile. Remember when Eminem just talks about all the bad things. And then he's like, all right, tell me something you don't know about him. So Henderson, the durability stuff is, I think, built into his dynasty value already, because that's the number one knock on all these dudes that post content I see all the time about durability issues. And so that's already built in. The question for me, and I guess for you, is like, can he play well enough where the durability concerns go away and they can just say, hey, that he's just special. Hey, we got to put him out there. He's going to have that. I think that's the thing that will hinder him. I think he's going to get the draft capital. I think I'm going to love every spot he probably goes to. I can't see a team that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he went there. But we never know. Like, I can't say never on that. But I think it's the durability piece. Will the built-in value of him having those durability issues for the couple years, his sophomore and junior year, hurt him overall in Dynasty?
Yeah. And, he had a really good freshman season. Year 2 and year 3 were rough for him because of the injury concerns, knee, leg, ankle, foot stuff. And to some extent, they didn't even share some of the injuries that were going on with him. So I'd say, but one thing that does happen with running backs and in injuries is if you get far enough away from it, say you get 2 seasons in, 3 seasons in, three of exceptional performance. We already got one last year of pretty good performance. If you keep getting those exceptional performances without having the injuries, I think we can forget about it. But if it keeps lingering throughout the process, say you're missing 5 games in rookie season and 6 games your first year, then you're going to have those durability issues. And I think that keeps getting valued into his process. And then I don't know if he can get to the RB1, but he certainly has the elite traits that if that durability holds up, that he has that upside to be in, the RB1 conversation. If everything holds, that's definitely within his range of upside case. And again, we're going young here. There's lots of guys. You mentioned Kenneth Walker III, Josh Jacobs, Christian McCaffrey, Quinshon Judkins, Chase Brown, Derrick Henry. There's lots of guys that could be the actual RB1, but who holds that value? When you talk about guys like Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry, who are pushing 29, 30 years old, even though they might score the most points, it's hard to really value them at the top. So that's why we're going with these younger guys, the guys that, are in their 22, 23 range, as opposed to that 25 range, almost becoming to the point where you hit the age cliff for running backs. That kind of comes.
I almost picked CMC just to be weirdo and just say, hey, you could get back. Yeah. Like I almost did it. Like it was close. But I do want to mention this before we move on. I think, I got in an argument in some weird Discord. I don't remember where I was at. And they were talking about Kenneth Walker. And I said, you know what? I think Kenneth Walker's underrated, right? Like he's sitting out there outside the top 10. I know he had his injuries last year, but he was running back 12 in fantasy points per game last season. Like he was a running back 1, low end guy, right? But when you're looking at that, I just look at their offensive line. If they can improve that a little bit, I think they're going to address their interior offensive line in the draft. Then, they have Darnold there, but I really think with the moves that they've made, they're going to kind of go probably to more of a running back volume kind of scheme there. Obviously, bringing a new offensive coordinator is going to help that. And when you look at Walker, he ranked 3rd in first downs per route run. That's pretty good. 6th in target per route run. So he can catch passes. Like I know Charbs is there and I get that. Walker's the better player. I don't care what anybody says. They can say whatever they want about Charbonnet. Walker is the better guy there and he can catch passes. Like he can do that. Like his 3-down skill set was on full display last year. He led the NFL in missed tackles force per attempt. That's great. Ranked 10th in yards after contact. We love that. He could be a legitimate league winner. Kenneth Walker could be that guy right now that we're all sitting out there that no one wants to buy, that all of a sudden is now the running back 1 overall. Could happen. Not saying it's going to happen, but I think he's going to outperform his ADP and his value right now. So Walker is a sneaky one that we didn't put in here, probably because the age thing and Charbs being there and kind of that new offense of what you're looking at there. But Walker could do it, man. I think he's a value. Like I really do. I would argue that Kenneth Walker's someone out there you should go buy in Dynasty.
I like that. And, I do think that he gets depressed a little bit by Zach Charbonnet being sort of the same age, younger as well. That kind of torpedoes guys. When, the other situation is if you have a Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery being the, 28-year-old guy and Gibbs being the very, very young guy with the electric ability. There's a little bit of a differentiation there as opposed to Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet both kind of being the same age and having, sharing the workload and kind of doing somewhat similar things, although it's slightly different. Whereas with Gibbs and Montgomery, the roles are very, very defined and you have, one elite young guy and one guy that helps the offense, but a bit older. He's not really a threat to it. So I do agree though. I think Kenneth Walker could have a pretty good year this year. So yeah. I like that idea.
All right, let's get weird. All right, let's go to wide receivers now. Let's get into this. This was a lot of fun. This was like kind of like, all right, where do we go here? Way too many Ohio State guys though. Like it is disgusting out here. Like I don't know. Like oh my god. Like it was hard. Like even Jay was joking with me. You like Ohio State guys? I'm like yeah. I like talented players. Unfortunately, all these damn wide receivers keep going to Ohio State, and it's not stopping. There's another guy coming. If you guys don't watch college football too much, his name is Jeremiah Smith. But all right, let's get into the wide receivers here. So again, looking at guys outside the top 10 who could possibly go in there. This was tougher. I probably took the one you were going to take. And so, I took Marvin Harrison Jr. You took Garrett Wilson. Talk to me about Garrett Wilson. What do we think here? Because his value is at an all-time low, probably lower than I've ever seen it.
Yeah. What I'd say is if you're looking you need a wide receiver to buy right now, it looks like if you buy an Ohio State wide receiver, any of them, you're probably getting a pretty good value. I'd say that. But yeah. Garrett Wilson is somebody that I put a buy on last offseason with with Aaron Rodgers coming there. But, basically he's a target hog for the Jets and has been ever since he got drafted. So 3 years in the league, every single year he has over 1,000 yards. He's a very, very high target share, a very, very high air yards share. He basically, from a points per game perspective, never does that great, but from an expected points per game, he always is very, very high. So those are the expected points per game are based on, all those things like target share and air yards and all those things. They're kind of estimating what this player should get if you have sort of average QB play and average everything else. And he continually crushes that. And so I think that it's just a matter of time until he gets that breakthrough season where the points per game that he gets matches what is expected from him at what since all those routes and all the dominating of the share of the offense. And so eventually I do think that this comes through because there's so many points per game that is kind of left on the table from him based on bad QB play over the past 3 years. The good thing is they addressed the QB in the offseason with free agent Justin Fields, who actually played at Ohio State college football with Garrett Wilson, and they've already had good seasons together. The problem is you don't exactly know what you're going to get entirely out of Justin Fields from a passing perspective. One other good thing is that, well, at least from a fantasy perspective, but maybe not from a team or winning perspective, is they really haven't addressed the wide receiver or the pass catcher's position for the Jets at all. So, this is a situation where, if he's getting 30+% of the targets, he might get high 30% plus if the wide receiver room doesn't change up at all through the draft. The hope is you get a good draft, but the pass catchers right now are Josh Reynolds, Alan Lazard, Malachi Corley, Tyler Johnson, Xavier Gibson, and at tight end they have Jeremy Ruckert, another Ohio State Buckeye. But this is not a good passing. It's Garrett Wilson and basically nobody. So the opportunity for him is there again. Just can we get new coaching staff, fresh new QB? Can we get all this mesh together and get him actually producing fantasy points as what he should do? Yeah. What would be expected from him given all those targets? And I guess the conviction level isn't crazy high because it is Justin Fields. I do think Justin Fields might have a pretty good season, and I do agree that there's chemistry, but you never know exactly how that's going to play out. But I just think there's so much opportunity for him to continue to be the target hog of the New York Jets. And in any of those situations, when you have one guy that's the focal point of the offense and nobody else, they're going to force feed him. They're going to give him the ball. I think he has the skill set to do really well with when he gets the ball. And so I really like that from a value perspective. I think he's one of those guys that has the opportunity just because he has so much of a part of the offense to get into that high 18, 19 fantasy points per game range if he could just get that consistent good QB play from one of the QBs. Right now, he's wide receiver 13 on KTC and wide receiver 14 on Fantasy Calc. It works out to be just about pick 1.03. And I'm not sure who, there's Ashton Genty, Ted McMillan, maybe you put Cam Ward and Mario Hampton in there, but who would you rather have? I think for the most part, besides maybe, I don't know, it's kind of hard. I might want Garrett Wilson over a lot of those guys. Maybe not Ashton Genty, but over a lot of those guys. And so I like the value that you can get from Garrett Wilson. It's just, is it another year and Justin Fields kind of flops and, it's another year where it doesn't work out? That's certainly a possibility. But if it does work out and he does command that market share and he gets the 18, 19 fantasy points per game, he's young enough. I think he can rise substantially and be in that top 5, in contention. I don't know if he gets to the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors range, but I can see him in there wide receiver 4 area. Maybe if everything goes right, maybe even higher than that, but we'll see.
Yeah. A couple things just to prop up your pick. Because I'm your co-host, I'm trying to be nice too. Okay, and I like Garrett Wilson. So Tanner Engstrand, he's the offensive coordinator. He just came over to the Jets. He came from the Lions. And what did the Lions just do? When you're looking at what they were able to do on offense, especially their passing offense and receiver and offense, look what they were able to do with Jared Goff. Obviously, that was a huge thing, right? Develop Jared Goff into a legitimate QB. Obviously, he has his question marks, but so does Justin Fields. But I think the biggest thing for me is look how the Lions used Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? And they're different players. Amon-Ra is a little bit, obviously a slot guy, a little bit different there, but I think they could utilize him the same way. I think that they can get him the football. I think that you're looking at Garrett Wilson possibly being that vocal point, right? This is why I do think the Jets are going to take a tight end, Tyler Warren, for example. Now that actually is not a bad thing, I don't think, for Garrett Wilson either, because of what they did with Laporta. You have Laporta, you have, Amon-Ra St. Brown. All right, now we'll build out. We'll get a speeds guy like, Jameson Williams. Okay, now we'll just plug and play these guys. We're going to get a pass-catching running back, right? They already have Brees, though. And then when you're looking at kind of what their roster looks like, it's not a bad way. And I think that they're going to try to emulate that Lions offense a little bit. And I think the big winner is going to be Garrett Wilson. The question always is going to be the quarterback. It is Justin Fields, right? So, that is it. So that's the thing holding him back, because from a talent standpoint, and I got into an argument on YouTube today with somebody in the comments, and they were talking about Nico Collins, and they said Nico Collins is more talented than Garrett Wilson. That is cap, as the kids say. Garrett Wilson is much better than Nico Collins from a talent perspective. If Garrett Wilson was on the Texans with CJ Stroud, Garrett Wilson would be dynasty wide receiver 3. 4, in my opinion. I really think he could be that high. So I love the pick. I think that's great. I think that you did a great job with the pick here. It's just the Fields. It's Fields. That's the question. Because I think coaching and everything else is fine.
Yeah, and you know what? The year that Justin Fields played with Garrett Wilson, they had a really, really good year at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Statistically was really, really good. And so if they can recreate any of that magic, that's awesome. That would work really well. And maybe the change of scenery for Justin Fields really works out. And they're able to kind of produce something like that. But yeah, like you said, it comes down to can Justin Fields support that many yards and that many touchdowns to Garrett Wilson throughout the season for him to get the points he needs to get up there. And yeah. I'm not sure. It could happen, might not. But that's what we're doing. We're shooting for upside, hoping that hits.
Well, let me give you upside, sir. Can I be willing to proposition you as a dynasty wide receiver 11 right now, and Marvin Harrison Jr., who was at 3 last year around this time, who could possibly just get back up in that range, right? And this is the thing with Marvin Harrison Jr., and I wrote an entire spotlight on him, I think almost 5,000 words. So last year, I mean, he was brought up as being the next wide receiver 1, right? He had 885 yards and 8 touchdowns, which wasn't bad. Fantasy points per game, he was at wide receiver 39. That was bad. But he didn't have a terrible year, oh my God, what's wrong with this guy? He just struggled in terms of the offense, right? And I think it was more Kyler Murray. And, when you're looking at Petzing's offense there, what they were trying to do, Drew Petzing's their offensive coordinator, very run heavy, very what was going on in terms of 12 and 13 personnel and RPOs and play action. The issue was Kyler Murray doesn't do that well. And they struggled. Their connection really struggled there. So when you look at last year's usage, Harrison saw 116 targets. We caught just 53% of them. That's an outlier, though, because Kyler Murray's completion percentage jumps to 72% with Harrison. So I think part of it was miscommunication, probably bad scheming, and some growing pains. They're going to have that. You're going to have growing pains as a rookie wide receiver. That's just part of it. So why do I think Harrison can bounce back? Well, better understanding of the system. I think that he's going to do very well this year, kind of elevating himself. He understands Kyler Murray's tendencies. And a couple things, too. I think that they're going to have better just communication with the out of structure stuff, the off structure stuff, the things that Murray does well. He gets outside the pocket, gets on the run. You saw a little bit down the stretch between him and Harrison Jr. had that like, oh, that's what you're looking for me to do. Okay, now, hey, here's that long touchdown pass, or that comeback route. This is where you want me to go. There was signs. There was life, as Frankenstein would say, right? There was life there. Like we saw it, we saw the light kind of go off between that chemistry between them. So I do think, when you're looking at it, I think that this offense is going to have to put him in better situations. I think that he's not just a jump ball guy. I think he has very good yak ability. I think he can create after the catch. So you're going to see them roll Kyler out more, create more space for him, let Harrison showcase his talent. I don't think it's going to be forced screens. I think it's going to be more intentional with his usage. All right, how are we going to get this guy the football? They're going to do that. So to me, just based on value, because all we want, if this dude goes out and has 2 good games beginning of the year, he's going to be a top 5 guy immediately, because people are that's just where their value is with Harrison. They think he's that elite guy. And I think he can be. I think when you're looking at it just from all that perspective, Harrison Jr. can be a wide receiver 1. Like I think there's an avenue where he just goes off. I know McBride is there, but that's it. They might draft a wide receiver. I don't know. We'll see kind of what happens there. But there's an avenue where I think that he is so talented and so young that you could get him back into a wide receiver 1 territory.
Yeah, I completely agree. If he was still on the board when I was picking, I would pick Marvin Harrison Jr. He would be my number 1 choice to get into that wide receiver 1 range. If you're sitting last year in the offseason and you said Kyler Murray with Marvin Harrison Jr. and not many other options, and then you have Malik Neighbors with Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, and everybody else that played quarterback for the Giants before the season, who you going into the season, you probably are thinking, man, Marvin Harrison has a really good shot to be a top wide receiver in that Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson range. But it turns out that was the complete opposite, and Malik Neighbors really solidified himself and performed really well, even with poor QB play. And that's the kind of thing. Then I think that's why Marvin Harrison fell down. But I do think that these guys are of similar talent levels. And so if they can just if Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison can just get on the same page here for this season or next season or however long it takes, it's going to be special. And I do think, like you said, he'll vault up, first 2 games, early in the season, if it starts clicking, if they start really, really getting some points, he's the guy that can rise the fastest, the quickest, and the highest of any of these wide receivers. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. right there, more than any of these other guys sitting here in that range. You got guys like Jackson Smith-Njigba, Lad McConkey, AJ Brown, T. Higgins, Rome Odunze. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. has the highest potential out of any of those guys, and it'll happen fast too, especially if they start clicking. I think it'll move really, really quickly. So I love your pick.
And I don't think there's any rookies, even with Tet McMillan being there and those guys that could get in that category. Not this class. Not yet, I don't think. Unless you count Travis Hunter.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I like Tet. I think he's a really good wide receiver. I don't know if he has that 20 points per game potential. Yeah. Maybe he can get there, but it would take the right situation with a really good QB. This situation here, I mean, Garrett Wilson doesn't have a very great QB, and Marvin Harrison Jr. has an okay QB. Maybe they get the chemistry going and whatnot. But it's really, to me, it would come down to where does Tet McMillan land? But to me, I see his upside as more like mid wide receiver 1 or back end wide receiver 1, and less so the upside of being actual wide receiver 1. But I'd say it's possible. He certainly has the physical skill set, and he can do really well if he lands in a situation where he gets a ton of opportunity with a good QB. I think that could work. Mm-hmm. But I'd rather place my bets on Marvin Harrison and Garrett Wilson, even with the not so certain QB situations or average QB play.
There's a very fun, and we're not going to do it today. I'm not ready to open myself up for this kind of criticism, but there is a very fun Rome Odunze conversation out there. I think, in my opinion, that could be had at some point. I think Rome's getting slept on a little bit, just a little bit, but it's just hard. DJ Moore, you got a lot of question marks, but I think there's a conversation to be had somewhere out there.
Maybe. I mean, I like DJ Moore. We'll see what happens with Caleb Williams. You got a new head coach there. I think that the trajectory is very, very positive. And if Caleb Williams starts slinging it like he was able to do early in college, there could be a potential that he feeds a couple of wide receivers really, really high. But yeah, I mean, I like DJ Moore as well. So I think like the upside in that room for Caleb Williams doing well, it probably starts with DJ Moore, and then Rome Odunze is part of that as well. But that's nice. But yeah, you're right.
Those of you that Those of you that maybe don't listen to the show all the time. That was Jay's very nice way of telling me I'm an idiot. He just goes out. He just says it a different way. Like as soon as he starts that conversation off the way he started it, he's like, "All right, let's move on. You're getting off the rocks today." All right, let's go to tight ends. This will be quicker because it's just hard with the tight ends, and we cheated 100% because when you're looking at the tight end rankings out there, we mentioned the top 5, and when you think of like, all right, well, who's next? Like, who can be in that category? Like outside, not the rookies, Dalton Kincaid, no. I almost took Tucker Crafts, but I can't because I'm a coward, Jay. I almost did it. Njoku, no. Pitts, absolutely not. I'm not going down that road again. Andrews, likely. Ingram, Otten. Like when you look at those guys, it almost has to be one of these rookie tight ends. Like you almost have to do it. So essentially, we just split it. We said, hey, could be one of these guys. Like we both love Loveland a ton. So I still took Warren because after Loveland's gone, I don't necessarily love those other guys that I mentioned either. But overall, I think it's going to be hard to surpass Brock Bowers. Like it's just going to be hard to get someone as that one spot. That's probably the biggest question mark. And it's going to simply come down to where these guys go, because if they go somewhere where they're the number 2, they got a shot. But if they don't go somewhere they're number 2, there's probably no possibility.
Yeah. And I'll just talk a little bit about Colson Loveland because I really like him. Mm-hmm. And I know you do too. And I really think that he's getting slept on here. I think he's one of the best players in this draft. And all players. I think he's like a top 15 level type of prospect. And he didn't get the crazy production that you'd love to see, like that you saw from Brock Bowers. But he met, from experience adjusted metrics, he met most every single thing that you can look for. Now he falls into tier 2, but he's a very high tier 2 guy for me. My only tier 1 guys this year are Ashton Jeanty and Ted McMillan. But he's my 3rd highest player. Okay. And at the tight end, and he's at the tight end position. So I very clearly have him above Tyler Warren and above some of these running backs. So I think he's pretty special. Now, from a value perspective, he's not going until the later part of the first round, early part of the second round. And I love that value. If you can get Loveland at that range, I want that. If you trade back and then grab Loveland, I love that. I think he does have the potential to be that top 5. Like you said, I don't know about Brock Bowers, but I think he could probably be that tight end too. I think maybe compete there with Trey McBride, Sam Laporta. I think he could be really in that range. And I really do like him. He's a year 3. He's an early declare, which I love in my model. He'll be 21 on draft day. I think he goes in the first round. From a size perspective, he's 6'5", 245. Perfect. Really, really, really good profile from him. And I think he met all those metrics that you like to see from tight ends. It doesn't wow you. Where he's playing at Michigan, where they focus heavily on the run game, but he played a little bit with J.J. McCarthy. This last season, he didn't have great QBs passing him the ball, but even so, he still was the majority of the offense for this last year. So I think in general, for 2024, he had a 37.6% targets per route run. He is more than double the next highest pass catcher on the team in receptions, which was a wide receiver, Tyler Moore. So he was he even had a 14.2% first downs per route run. So when they needed a first down, they went to him all the time. So he was basically Michigan's passing game as a tight end in his third year. Obviously the accounting numbers, the overall numbers don't look incredibly. He's not certainly didn't put up numbers like Brock Bowers, but he met all of the thresholds. He's very, very athletic. I think he goes in the first round. I think everything's sort of setting up for him to be, along the stuff that I look for in terms of prospects, to be somebody that goes on to the NFL and is fairly successful and can command a good portion of an offense if he falls into that situation where there's opportunity for him to be a pass catcher. Mm-hmm. And I do think he'll be that pass catcher. So I like him. I really like his upside. I like him, and this might be a little hot techy, I like him a lot more than Tyler Warren. I think Tyler Warren's good. I value them in the same tier. It's just I have Colston Loveland almost closest to tier 1, and then Tyler Warren sneaking into tier 2 kind of thing, just based on their profiles. So I really, really like the Colston Loveland profile. Not to say that Tyler Warren doesn't go to the NFL and be really good. I just think Colston Loveland has the setup of what a prospect needs to be very, very good in the NFL, and I'm shooting for that upside with him. Again, we don't know the situation. You hope he falls into a good situation, but I think he's a really good player. I think he goes in the first round. I think he's one of the best top 15 players in this draft, which you've seen some hate on Colston Loveland. And he keeps getting pushed down in fantasy drafts. Maybe that's because some of the running backs get pushed up above him, or some of the other guys have good testing numbers and get pushed up above him. But I really like what Colston Loveland can do, and I think he has the potential to be tight end 2, probably. Yeah. Maybe even as early as next year if he gets in the right situation.
100%. I think he can be better than Laporta. I think he can, when you're looking at just the rankings overall, so Loveland's comp for us is Laporta. So we think he could be Sam Laporta, and I think he could be a little bit better. I think from a route running perspective, I think he's more fluid. I think he's more athletic from that perspective. He's my tight end 1 too. So I just took Tyler Warren because, hey, how do these tight ends look here? I think Brock, Warren, and Loveland could all be top 5 next year easily, right? Brock's already there, but Warren and Loveland could be 2, 3. It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't be like, oh, wow, that's crazy. No, I wouldn't, because of what they were able to do from a production standpoint in college. And when you look at Warren, I think the one thing about Warren that probably makes me, I don't want to say nervous, but when you look at his profile, and Jay will probably can attest this, 5th-year kid, right? Broke out his 5th year, basically. He had 1,200 yards, which was great, 8 touchdowns. He also had the 4 rushing touchdowns. You love that. But just from a perspective of profiles, early breakout, Loveland's got that, right? And Loveland, to me, that's where I lean. Now, the things for Warren that would be positive, could be the tight end 1, right? Or push up there into that range with Bowers, is that he can just pretty much do it all. He's well-rounded. He route running, separation skills, blocking, physical blocker, right? Loveland's a good blocker too. I don't want people to think that he's not, because he is, but he's not the best traditional inline guy. That's going to be Warren. But if a team drafts Warren with the idea of him being more of a 12 personnel inline guy, and it limits his catching and limits his receiving, that's a problem. Where Loveland, they can't really do that, because if you draft Loveland, you kind of have to have a role as a receiver first, and then inline will come. So that's probably the where we're at with both of these guys. But I do think Warren could step in. And what if he goes to the Jets, right? Would that hurt him maybe? Would people look at Justin Fields, Garrett Wilson being there, and then maybe go down? Loveland's been mocked everywhere. And so I've seen Loveland all across the board there. And I think it's interesting and fun, depending on some of the mocks that you have out there with where he's going. But I think Loveland, just from his profile, is probably more of the ideal tight end 1 type, because Warren's not in the level of athleticism as Brock Bowers. Warren is not in that realm. So Warren's going to have to really overcome some of that, where I think Loveland is in that athleticism realm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's not to say that Warren doesn't go off and find the right situation and really crush. And he certainly has a high upside potential. Just look at the season that he had last year, all the numbers he was able to put up in his 5th year at Penn State. That's exciting if he can do that in the end. If that then translates to the NFL and he can do something similar to that he certainly has that ability. But Loveland, to me, has the high upside piece of it. And if that really does hit, I really do think that he could contend with Brock Bowers. Maybe it's not Brock Bowers had the pedigree, the stats, everything that you wanted throughout his entire prospect profile. Then he goes to the NFL and does well, even with not that great QB play. He dominates that room as well. So Brock Bowers has a lot going for him, but Colston Loveland has some of that as well, some of that same stuff going as well. It's just not as significant. It's not as like wow because the accounting numbers aren't crazy high, but I think he certainly has the potential. And I love that prospect profile. I think this is one of those that could be his value could rise substantially.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about tight end 7 at if you're going at on Keep Trade Crut, it's like early second round value, 2.02, 2.03. That's what you have to pay for him. In the grand scheme of things, that's not all that much for somebody that could then get you differentiated fantasy points and being in that top end. So I love taking, if you need them, I love taking the tight ends in the late first round. If you can get Colston Loveland, you watch Tyler Warren go at 1.08 and you can get Colston Loveland at 2.01, 2.02. I love that. I think it will help you from a fantasy perspective, help you win championships because you can get differentiated tight end play in this early second round. That's really, really awesome. That those people that have early first round and then early second rounds, if you get Tet McMillan or Ashton Genty, and then you pair that with Colston Loveland, you have just tremendously improved your team with Colston Loveland's upside.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we're on the same page there. There's no one really other than at the other tight ends that I would pick. Like it's either these two guys or bust, right? Like I don't see anybody else in that category. You're not going to talk about Pitts again, are you?
Yeah, I was going to talk about.
Don't do it. No, we're not talking about Pitts.
Pitts is the only person that maybe looks so like Njoku scores a ton of points, but the age perspective, we're talking about a guy that's almost 29. Now, there's obvious situations where tight ends go on and can put up points for very well into their 30s. Travis Kelce, all the old greats, Antonio Gates, all those guys. I don't know if Njoku could do that, but he certainly puts up the points. I don't know if he has the potential to get into that tight end 1 position. If Pitts ever can, I mean, he's had those injuries. Those injuries really got in the way, but he certainly has a potential to do it. It's hard to put all your marbles behind that. All your any bet you're going to take there, you're going to make sure you have enough amount of risk in there because the Kyle Pitts experience has been sort of a little bit of a roller coaster ride, mostly down.
A little bit of roller coaster
mostly not great, but he certainly has the potential if everything started to like get into sync and they started going and he started feeling a little bit better from his injuries. I think those injuries have really carried over and really affected his play. And I don't know if he ever gets over that piece of it. But if things start syncing up and he gets back to kind of what he was in his rookie season or what he was at this last year in Florida, there's certainly potential that he could vault his way up because he certainly has that type of ceiling within him. But I don't know if it happens. I don't know if it ever happens. But that would be one guy that he's still 25 years old.
All right. We got to stop. Okay, I can't let you keep talking about him. I don't know if you've ever been on a roller coaster. It's supposed to go back up, Jay, after you go down. Like after the first drop, there's supposed to be a momentum going up. Like give me some, there could be some circles, there could be some twirls, but like give me up first. Come on. Like we gotta pin it. We just gotta get out there. All right. Yeah. Final thoughts on this. I think it's a fun process. I think this was interesting to kind of go through and try to find some guys who could elevate their value right now. Maybe they're not ones, but these are guys definitely that we all expect to probably boost their value and they could really get higher than what they currently are right now. And that's also part of this deal. It's like, okay, not only that, like who are some guys right now that we basically values, right? And we don't want to do dynasty buys like everybody else does, but these are guys that we're thinking, hey, could really increase their value. And we have skin in the game. I traded for Marvin Harrison Jr. right after I wrote a whole article about him. I do these things because I value them and I think they can win your leagues, and I do them in my leagues, right? It's not just to get clicks here. That's not what we're doing. Any final thoughts on this process before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, if you're out there and you can buy some of these guys. Now, we purposely are just not, of course, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts can be QB1. Of
Yeah.
course, that's the case. You have to pay for that because we all know that's the case. Guys like Drake May and JJ McCarthy, those are exciting, interesting opportunities that you don't have to pay an arm and a leg for. And I think that they could help you win. I like those guys. The wide receivers, Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, those are really, really interesting guys that you guys can go out and buy at reasonable prices, especially given what you can see out there for this year's NFL draft. These are interesting ways to go out and win, where theirs could be just a tremendous increase in values and at not an unreasonable price right now. And so we really like those. Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland. The running backs are a little bit harder. That's gonna be really like situation dependent. That was really tough for us to get those guys, but we like those guys. But man, JJ, Drake, Marvin Harrison, Garrett Wilson, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren. Those are really interesting players that you can get that have that really, if you're really shooting for the upside, if you want to try and win, those are really, really interesting guys to go after at this stage.
Yeah, no, 100%. All right. We appreciate you guys. Go check out our Substack. Go look at all of our content down there. You can find a description below, the Patreon. We got a bunch of stuff coming your way. We've been really excited about it. We just dropped our projects that we're going to do for the entire year. If you're part of our community, and we have a lot of great projects out there for you guys to take a look at and kind of dive into. It's a free article on our Substack. If you want to go check that out. As always, we appreciate you guys listening, watching, all the stuff that you do. If you're on YouTube, drop a comment. Let us know why we're crazy on some of these guys. But if you're on the podcast, leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. We appreciate the views. You've been very consistent. We can't ask for more out here in this space with I don't know, how many podcasts are out there now? A million and a half? I don't know what it is, but a lot out there. So if you take the time out of your day to listen to us, we do appreciate that. So we got a fun one next week. We're gonna venture our way into Devy a little bit. So go out there and make sure you download this thing so you don't miss it.